this week in anatomy, students have been looking at the muscles of the forearm and the hand and stuff like that. So I thought I'd look at this model of the arm, which I haven't. I'm missing a whole triceps here, but I'm not going to talk about triceps. So hang on, I'll go to the lab, see if I can find triceps. Found it. See, told you the students have been studying the arm. Right, there we go. We've got a complete model now. Okay, so over the next 10 minutes or so, let's work our way through the muscles of the forearm. If we get really adventurous, we can look at the thumb. But you know, muscles of the thumb, that's scary. But we'll work at. So students were asking me, how do you approach the muscles of the forearm? How do you remember what's what? So I would say, start superficially and work deep, and do one side and then the other. That's right, carry on. Don't mind Anthony, he's clanging around in the background. I'm sure he's using the space properly, I'm just pinching a bit of space. So let's look at the muscles and then we'll maybe take layers off, but the main thing is, where does the muscle come from and where does it go to? And I think in the forearm, if you see where the muscle is going to, that's your cue to work out how it works. I better wash my hands, scrubs. Alright, so let's start on the flexor side. So I guess we should talk about parts of the arm, right? So if this is the forearm, or the antebrachium, and the hand, we've got a whole bunch of movements, haven't we? So we've got extension of the wrist, which you might also see as that's extension, and then that's flexion of the wrist. So we have a bunch of muscles doing that. And then we've got flexion of the fingers, and extension of the fingers. And then with the thumb, you've got to remember that the thumb is on a plane at 90 degrees to the fingers. So you've got flexion of the thumb and extension of the thumb. And then you've got abduction of the fingers and adduction of the fingers. And then with the thumb, you've got abduction of the thumb and adduction of the thumb. It's commonly confused. If you remember that the thumb is on a plane at 90 degrees to the fingers, it all adds up. Okay, so the thing is, whenever you're making any movement with your hand, you've got a huge number of muscles all working together to let you do what you want to do, even if you're just making a fist, even if you're pointing at things. Because of course the muscles that are flexing the fingers will also want to flex the wrist, so they could also flex the wrist, which means you've got to use other muscles which extend the wrist to stop it from flexing while you flex the fingers, so you can, you know, do that, right? So we're going to think maybe about these muscles in isolation, but really you should consider that these muscles all work together. Okay, so let's start with the muscles of the anterior forearm, which are going to be flexor muscles, and they're either going to be flexing the digits, flexing the fingers, or they're going to be flexing the wrist. So these are the flexors. Alright, so here's the model. Here's the thumb. So this is a right hand. Right. This is the flexor compartment, this is anterior. So if this is the thumb, you know this is the radial side, and you know this is the radial artery, right? So can you see, this is the radial artery, here's a tendon here, and look how it's coming from here across here. But it's only going as far as the wrist, it's going to the carpal bones. So it's going to the radial side, it's going to the carpal bones, and it's a flexor, so it's going to be Flexor Carpi Radialis, right? That's this muscle here then. So the next muscle there, see this muscle here is similar, but it's more in the middle, and it's stopped here, but it's actually going to fan out. So this is going to be palmaris longa, so it's a long muscle that's going to form into the palm. Alright, so that's bum bum. And then there's another muscle here, it's a little bit deeper, but where's this one going? So this is also going to the wrist, it's going to the carpal bones, But this is on the ulnar side, right? This is the ulnar artery and the ulnar nerve in here. And it's also in the flexor compartment. So this must be Flexor, Carpi, Ulnaris, right? So there are those three muscles there. So when I say Carpi, I'm talking about the carpals. But these Carpi muscles do actually make it all the way to the metacarpals. But, you know. There's another muscle here. So you see this muscle here, short muscle, it's actually not going into the wrist. You've got your two bones, your ulnar and your radius, and this is just going across to the radius. Here's the thumb, here's the radius. So that shorter muscle is just running across there, so it's going to pull on the radius and cause it to do that, which is going to make you do that, so you're pronating. So that's Pronator teres. Well, here's the cubital fossa, right? There's the cubital fossa. So those muscles are all across here. And then we've got this other muscle here, which is Brachioradialis, which I'll come on to in a bit. So those muscles are coming from, most of them are coming from this bony point here. Here's the humerus. This is the epicondyle of the humerus, and it's medial. So this is the medial epicondyle of the humerus. And they're spanning across there. So that's where those wrist flexors are coming from. So if we go to the next layer, if we go a bit deeper, what happens if we take these off? The next layer of muscles are going to the digits, because those are the things left over that we want to flex. And we can do really strong things with our fingers, right? We can make really, really strong grips. We can climb up steep cliffs with just holding on with our fingers. So we've got a lot of muscle in the forearm, which is running up into the fingers. So we've got these long tendons here. Now the first muscle layer is Flexor Digitorum superficialis. Flexors of the fingers, Digitorum superficialis. So there's two layers. And it's quite a broad muscle. This is again coming from that medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it's coming from the radius, and it's extending. And if we were to look in here, we were able to pull this apart, we'd see 4 tendons which run underneath the retinaculum and give us these 4 tendons here. Now the interesting thing is that as these tendons extend into the fingers, if we have the proximal and distal phalanges and the intermediate or middle phalanges in between, then this tendon of the Flexor Digitorum superficialis tendon splits. So it doesn't go to the very tips of your fingers, it goes to this part of your finger here, and it splits to allow the other tendon to run through. So if that's Flexor Digitorum superficialis, then there must be a Flexor Digitorum deep, or profundus, meaning deep. So if I take this layer off, what do I find? Alright, there we go. So now we're starting to see the deep nerves. We've got the median nerve here, the ulnar nerve, the ulnar artery, and other bits and bobs. But the muscle layer, can you see how we're starting to form some tendons here? So this is the muscle of Flexor Digitorum profundus, and it's sending 4 tendons, and those tendons will also run up into the fingers, and they're going to go between the splitting of this tendon here, and they're going to go to the very tips of your fingers. So then it's possible to tear the tendon of Flexor Digitorum profundus going to the tip of your finger, and yet still be able to flex your finger, but not be able to do that bit, not be able to do that movement, right? Because profundus doesn't attach to the finger there. That's most of the muscles of the forearm. You can go deeper, but you can't go deeper on this model. And if you go deeper, then there's another muscle running across here. There's another muscle running across here, and that's Pronator Quadratus. Quadratus, quadratic, you know, like rectangular shaped. And it's another pronator, so Pronator teres and Pronator Quadratus will both pronate. So you can pronate quite forcefully, which is useful if you're trying to, you know, undo bolts or screws or things like that. See, it's not so bad, is it? Just work your way through step by step. So that's the flexor compartment. Next is the extensor compartment. So it's these guys here. So these are all then innervated by the radial nerve. We saw the median nerve running through there, and the median nerve is innervating most of those guys. The radial nerve is innervating the extensor muscles. We've got a few things going on here. The first thing we should talk about is this muscle here. So here's biceps, right? Let me put the other muscles back on. So here's biceps, here's Pronator teres, here's Flexor Carpi radialis. Right. So forming the other border of the cubital fossa is this big muscle here, and this is Brachioradialis. If this is the brachium up here, this muscle then is going from the brachium up to the radius. If you want to see Brachioradialis, there's biceps. Then the best way is to partially pronate. So your thumb's in line with your humerus, right? And then, I'm going to get in the way. And then, if you then try to flex your elbow against resistance, can you see this muscle here is this muscle here that pops up is brachioradialis. That then is very powerful in flexing in that way. So that's brachioradialis. So that's not really a forearm muscle. That's where it is, but it's acting across the elbow, so that's not taking part in wrist or finger movements, so we can forget about that one. Well, don't forget about it, but... So that's brachioradialis then. Let's take that out of the equation. Yeah, so we start at brachioradialis. Here's the thumb, so we're looking at the right hand, and we're looking at the posterior antebrachium, the back of the forearm, and these muscles are going to be either extending the fingers or extending the wrist. So what can we see? Well, we've got a muscle here, and look how so this is going from the other side. Look how its tendon is going. Look, it gets lost a bit, but it looks like this tendon is going all the way up to the wrist. And again, here's the radial artery. This is on the radial side. So this is an extensor muscle. It's going to the wrist, so it's going to the carpal bones. It's on the radial side. What do you reckon? Is that Extensor Carpi radialis? Yes, this is Extensor Carpi radialis. And by the way, I say these muscles go to the carpi, the carpals, the wrist. They actually insert into the metacarpals to give that effect, but you know. The trick with the Flexor Carpi radialis muscle is, in fact, there are two of them. There's Flexor Carpi radialis longus, so then there's Flexor Carpi radialis brevis. There's a long one and a short one. Longus is the first one you come to. So if this is brachioradialis, then this is Flexor Carpi radialis longus, and you can see it's longer, right? See, it's going all the way back here, whereas this is Flexor Carpi radialis brevis. Flexor Carpi radialis longus is going all the way around here from the humerus, whereas around here we've got the lateral epicondyle. Flexor Carpi radialis brevis is coming from there. There's the lateral epicondyle. There's the lateral epicondyle of the humerus there. So brevis comes from there. Whereas longus starts off back here, hence why it's so long. Hence why it's called longus. Alright, what else we got? That's easy. You see this muscle here, nice and wide, and it carries on, and we've got all these tendons going off here to the fingers. So this is going to extend the fingers. So this muscle then is Extensor Digitorum. That's it, Extensor Digitorum. There aren't two layers of There aren't two layers. It's just Extensor Digitorum. There's no superficialis and stuff. It's just Extensor Digitorum. And look at this finger here, right? You can point, right? These other fingers kind of all work together. I'm not going to talk about that much, but you can do special things with this finger, the pointy finger. It's got two tendons going to it. So you do have an extra muscle here. You can see the tendon, but the muscle itself isn't clearly defined. But this muscle is Extensor indicis. index finger, extensor indicis. Otherwise, extensor indicis and extensor digitorum. But we've got another muscle here. Again, we're at all up round here is the lateral epicondyle. Here, the lateral epicondyle. We've got a muscle here, which is then that's going into the wrist, and we're on the ulnar side there. So then this muscle must be extensor carpi ulnaris. And I'm talking about these in extensor groups and flexor groups, but don't forget that the carpi muscles, so the extensor carpi and flexor carpi muscles on the ulnar side will also cause ulnar deviation, and the extensor and flexor carpi muscles on the radial side will cause, oh, I can't even do it, they'll cause radial deviation. They'll move it that way. Your little finger is also a bit special. Look here, we've got two tendons there again. There's a muscle here which is extensor digiti minimi. Little finger, extensor digiti minimi. So we've got extensor indicis over here. We've got extensor digiti minimi over here somewhere, and then we've got all these tendons which are extensor digitorum as well coming up here. So that's pretty much it. We've got supinator as well. We've got what, anconius around here, and there's supinator. So we talked about the pronator muscles. There's also a supinator which will bring the hand back again, but that's really deep in here, and I don't think taking this apart will show supinator. So I don't want to talk about the muscles of the hand. That's a whole other video. You don't really want to talk about the thumb, do you? Oh, the thumb. Really, the thumb? Alright, so we can see lots of tendons here going up into the thumb, can't we? If we just think about the muscles of the thumb that are within the forearm. Now I said that that's flexion of the thumb, and that's extension of the thumb. And look, when I extend my thumb, so flexion, extension, can you see those tendons? See those tendons that pop up there? So those tendons are getting involved in extension of the thumb. That's abduction, that's adduction. That's flexion, that's extension. So when I extend, those two tendons pop up. The thumb gets called pollicis. It's the pollex. So I reckon those two tendons are part of extensor pollicis muscles. And we have a short one and a long one. So we have extensor pollicis brevis and extensor pollicis longus. This tendon here, this is extensor pollicis longus. It's going down there and it's going deep in here. Or rather, it's coming up from there, but you get the idea. And this tendon here is extensor pollicis brevis. I can never remember which is which. Longus is down here, brevis is down here. Just is.
Sam, do you want to rearrange while you do that?
Yeah, carry on. So there's one other tendon I can see here. If these two muscles are involved in extending the thumb, and I said that this is abduction. Do you see what I mean? Flexion, extension. Flexion, extension. And then this is abduction in this direction. Alright. You see a tendon there? Kind of. That's this tendon here. That's what this tendon's doing. If these two tendons are extending the thumb, this one is abducting the thumb. It's taking the thumb away. And there are two Abductor Pollicis muscles. This one goes into the forearm, so this must be Abductor Pollicis longus, because Abductor Pollicis brevis is within the thumb. You can find that one yourself, because I'm not doing the hand, I'm doing the forearm muscles. And that's it. See, it's not that bad. There aren't that many. There aren't that many, are there, Anthony? No, easy. Right, done. So, I'm glad a student asked me about that this morning, because I'd forgotten that the muscles of the forearm are somewhat terrifying, and there are a lot of them. But if you break them down sensibly in the way that we just did, I think they're not only a lot more straightforward to learn, but it makes a lot more sense, and you can look at the muscles of the forearm and then work out what's what. I like working out stuff much better than I like learning stuff. Still learning, but anyway. Right, see you next time.